And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is Irreverent, Faith and Current Affairs.
Welcome along to this very special episode of Irreverent, Faith and Current Affairs with me, Jamie Franklin. I am a vicar in the Church of England. I am also, along with my wife, a beginning home educator, really. I have three small children, one of whom is school age, and our intention is indeed to homeschool or home educate all of them. And the reason I'm making this special episode today with my guests is out of concern for a new bill which is being proposed, which was announced in the Queen's speech, which is called the Schools Bill, which really threatens to undermine and even destroy the basis of home education in the society. To many people who are concerned about the encroaching presence of the state in our private lives, particularly in this case, in our family lives, this comes as no surprise, but it is nevertheless extremely concerning. To tell us more about this, I'm very happy to be joined by Wendy Charles-Warner, who is the chair of Education Otherwise, which is a charity which supports families in their home educating efforts. And I'm also joined by Amie Miles. Amie is an experienced home educator, and she is a data miner, and she's doing an awful lot of good work on this issue as well. So Wendy and Amie, thank you very much for joining me to talk about this very important issue today.
Thank you.
Yep, you're very welcome. Would you like me to sum up what the bill actually contains so that your viewers can understand it?
Absolutely, Wendy, go ahead.
Super. The bill is what I would call a road to hell paved with good intentions. The intentions of the DfE are, I'm sure, good, but they're not based in fact, they're not based in evidence, and they have got it wrong. As the bill reads right now, a parent would be required to provide information about their child, whatever information the local authority asks of them. If they do not provide that information or provide incorrect information, they can be served with a school attendance order, fined, or spend up to 51 weeks in prison. That is even for making a clerical error. It's not misrepresentation, simply incorrect information. The parent may not have it. This bill also requires that local authorities collating that data will share it on an individual child basis or a consolidated basis with the DfE. We know that there have been numerous cases of data released by local authorities about home educated children. We also know that the DfE hit the press again only this week with yet another data release breaching Data Protection Act. In addition, the bill provides that any tutor or any individual providing more than a set amount of hours, not specified, of education to a child must register as an educational establishment. Nothing in the bill exempts a parent of more than 5 children from having to register, so any parent with more than 5 children would have to register as a school. Nothing exempts, for example, a grandparent who is caring for their child and educating them. And where tutors, for example, tutors providing remote distance learning have to register, they are not going to want to register in cases where providing incorrect information could get them fined or suspended from providing their service. It's too big a risk. Those are the primary points we're noting.
Yeah, and so Wendy, just take me back to the, or not take me back, but tell me what the current situation is. So the current situation, as I understand it, there's no compulsion to register your child with the government or indeed any other educational establishment if you want to homeschool or home educate. You simply need to not send your child to a school when they're of of the age when they would normally go to school. There's no legal obligation to provide your local authority with any information at all about how you're educating your children. That's correct, isn't it? So this seems to be a drastic change. And also, it seems to me to be granting the local authority a huge amount of leeway in terms of what they're actually asking parents. So is it right that the bill doesn't actually specify what the local authority can ask parents to provide them with? It gives the local authority all this power, but it doesn't actually specify what they're going to do with it. So really, they could do anything with it. And as you say, if they demand something from you as a home educator and you don't give it to them, or you're deemed not to have given it to them, they could issue you with a compulsory, what is it called, a compulsory attendance?
School attendance order.
A school attendance order, which is pretty much irrevocable, which means that you have to send your child to school. And failure to comply with these demands could result in penalties of multiple tens of thousands and even imprisonment. Have I got that right?
It's worse than that, actually. Going back to your point, currently, by far the majority of children are known to the local authority. It's roughly 96.5%. By far the majority are remove the child from a school roll and the local authority is notified. You're correct that the parent does not have to legally give any information to the local authority, but if they do not do so, the local authority can assume that the education is not suitable. However, there has always been very clear guidance that the local authority should act in a reasonable and proportionate manner, and it is not up to the parent to prove that education is not suitable. The law actually states that the local authority can only act if it appears to not be suitable. That turns it on its head. Coming to the penalties, we have in this country, and have had for 800 years, the law of double jeopardy. You cannot be prosecuted twice for the same crime. You cannot be punished twice for the same crime. If the crime that you commit is similar but substantially different, or it's at a different time, then another case could be brought. But even in those cases, most courts would dismiss such a prosecution as being unconstitutional. So this bill also introduces, instead of being able to prosecute somebody once for failure to comply with a school attendance order, if the parent then does not send the child to school after being fined £2,500, the parent can be prosecuted again, over and over and over. There is no limit. Double jeopardy goes out of the window. The only legal cases for which double jeopardy has ever been removed have been in recent years because of the rise of DNA evidence. There has been a removal for very serious cases. Specifically, it's been used with serial killers. Home educating parents aren't serial killers.
Yeah, it's very concerning, isn't it? So to the other point that I was making, this does seem to have come out of the blue. It's a drastic change, isn't it? So where has this change come from? What's pushing this politically?
What's pushing it is there are 152 local authorities in England. Of those local authorities, roughly 2/3 are proportionate, reasonable, and quite supportive. Some of them have excellent education staff. About 2 years ago, we had a handful who were appallingly behaved, bullying and harassing parents even, and they have been pushing to extend that practice to other local authorities. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is those local authorities who are overzealous have been lobbying government hard to bring in very controlling monitoring. You've also got some personalities. The Children's Commissioner and the ADCS absolutely do not like the previous Children's Commissioner, absolutely do not like home education.
Wendy, can you explain the ADCS, please?
I do apologise. Association of Directors of Children's Services.
Yeah.
Social workers, by their very nature, do not like home education. They simply do not feel that anything other than state controlled education is right for a child. We hear it said regularly. Their overseeing body is the Association of Directors of Children's Services, who have been lobbying for several years to get intense monitoring. And what's happened is they've had a couple of peers have come on side, they've had a few MPs come on side, and since 2012 we have had attempts to introduce this sort of draconian monitoring. Unfortunately, the DFE have been reassuring us for many, many months that they are not looking to monitor families. They are not looking to introduce anything. They simply want to support children, and in order to do so, they need to have a register. And that isn't what this bill is saying. Even if one accepts a register, which I certainly do not, because it's not warranted, that bill does not say that. It goes far further.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the bill the way that it is, it definitely brings into questioning the lay of the land, which has always been that somebody is innocent until proven guilty. However, this new bill, I should say, proposes actually treating the parent as guilty until proven innocent, which goes against how we as a country have governed ourselves for centuries. And it's not fair to treat a parent as if they're lying until the point where they can prove themselves innocent. And it's at the end of the day, this bill should be improving things for children, and particularly section 19 children, who at the moment, if they have an education supplied to them by the local authority will fund up to 5 hours of tuition and count it as full-time education. And that's just not appropriate to then say that because people are flexi schooling on a C code, they need to be part of this register and dual registered. The children who have an EHCP or an EATAS, suddenly they aren't being heard, they aren't being given the full-time education that should be provided to them by the local authority. Amy, and one of the worst parts of this bill that shudders me to my absolute core is that not only, as Wendy said, that the local authority can demand any information from a home educator, and that can be the value of your home, if you've got a car, your race, your religious beliefs, and everything else alongside it. And if you refuse that information, you are criminalized. Key piece of information that they are requesting is both parents' names and addresses. Now, pair that with Wendy's information that the local authority aren't able to protect your data, and pair it with the fact that there are millions of women in this country who have fled domestic abuse and domestic violence, to then be forced to hand over your ex partner's home address and information is just something that isn't going to safeguard anyone or any child in this country, and it's not been given an exemption in this bill.
Can I step in there and say, only yesterday I sat and watched a mother describing how she had been a victim of an attempted murder. She has had to uproot and move her family 3 times because on 3 separate occasions, the local authority education staff had disclosed her address to her former partner, who was the perpetrator of that crime. I listen to parents every day who tell me that local authorities are disclosing their information to their abusive former partners. I know that these people are terrified by this bill. I spoke this morning to a lady who lived in Australia, and whilst in Australia, she was required to register and provide the consent of her former partner who had not even seen her child for years. She thought she was safe when she came to England. She now doesn't think she is safe.
Yeah. If this bill passes, just to sort of help people understand the implications of this, if this bill passes in its present form, what will that mean practically for your average home educator in this country?
Gosh, it will mean that the local authority can ask you essentially for whatever information it wants. They could ask you, in fact, we know of local authorities who are particularly, shall we say, overzealous if you happen to come from a set religious background, such as Haredi Jewish or Muslim, or if you're from the Gypsy Romani traveller community, or you happen to be a single parent, or you happen to simply be of a different ethnic minority. They can ask you whatever they like. If you give incorrect information, whether that is by accident or intent, the local authority must, by law, serve you with a school attendance order notice, a preliminary notice. If you then do not give the correct information, they can fine you. And the fines comes from enforcement. And the enforcement can be up to 51 weeks in prison. So you imagine your ordinary home educating parent. They're educating their children. This particular parent is a single mum. She doesn't actually have her former partner's address because he left her and never provided it. But somebody has told her what they think his address is. So she supplies that information to the local authority. The local authority check that address and find it's wrong. They serve a notice on her. She can't comply with that notice because she actually does not know the correct information. But they will then demand from her information about her child's education in any format they require, any information they ask for. If she does not give it, they can enforce that order. She could be sent to prison for up to 51 weeks and her children would go into care.
Right.
So your ordinary person and another ordinary family, I happened to speak this morning again to a mum of 8 children. This mum of 8 children is a qualified medical professional with several degrees. But because she has 8 children, as the law stands, as an ordinary home educating mum, she will have to register as an educational establishment or be fined. If she does not register, she would be suspended from practicing education provisions, so she can't home educate. If she does register, she has to meet the standards that Ofsted require of educational establishments, which she cannot meet. And she would require a level 2 childcare certificate, a medical professional with degrees in the medical field and with very high level safeguarding experience. It may be set out with good intentions, but those good intentions, as I said earlier, they are baseless. There is no academic research to support the need for this bill, and there is significant research saying it will not work.
It's worth also mentioning there as well what Wendy was saying in her first example of the parent being asked to supply that information. If you were to go to court and use a C4 to get the information supplied to the local authority, then that would take approximately 9 months. I know because I've just done the same myself.
Amie, what is a C4?
It's a form that you send to the court for contact orders to disclose the address of the other partner. So obviously you would need to say to the court, this address needs to be supplied to the local authority because they are asking me for this information. Can you supply them directly with the information? Because obviously it's been withheld from myself.
Right.
And that information would, according to the new bill, need to be supplied within 15 days. And that's just impossible in anybody's standards. I've got an example just from Wendy's web forum just 2 minutes ago, where it took them 5 weeks to respond to a lady's report to say that it was satisfactory. You imagine how that poor lady's been feeling for 5 weeks, whether she knows whether or not she's going to get a school attendance order or not. That's just, normal people respond within 3 to 5 days. But not 5 weeks later. Oh yeah, okay, your report was okay, you can carry on now.
Clarify a couple of points here, Jamie, actually. Amie says 9 months. That's an estimate in her case. I have known cases last for more than 7 years. I've also known cases last for regularly for months and months. I've known cases where the information is refused and that parent would be committing an offence because they can't supply it. As to the time to reply, I can tell you that I've been waiting for 39 years.
Right. Okay. Well, that's quite a long time. So for people who are, sort of just coming to this for the first time, it probably sounds to them like what the local authorities are doing and what this bill is proposing is really designed to inconvenience, harass, to tie parents up with all sorts of red tape in order to make home educating as difficult and as awkward as possible, so that people will simply not bother and send their children to school so that they can be in the care of the state instead. What do you think about that?
Well, I can tell you that I sat in a meeting with a minister only 2 days ago who said to me that the best place for every child is in school. I cannot push for legislation to prevent home education, but the best place for every child is in school.
Was that a government minister?
Yes, but I cannot disclose who that minister was because this is a confidential discussion.
Okay.
But I can say that this is not unusual. I have sat in a meeting with a member of the House who has said to me, every home educators, we don't want to take any notice of those. They're all bigots who won't accept. I think it was gender issues. There was some comment made. I have been called by a local authority officer. I have been called the devil's work because I support home educating parents. But this is not the norm. This is by far not the norm. And when I'm talking to people, and the government minister I referred to was I'm sorry, I should say he was a former minister. He was a minister until relatively recently. My mistake, I just checked. The problem that we have is a complete lack of understanding of what home education is and what Cohen would have called the folk devil. Home educators are Cohen's folk devils. We all know what othering is about. It's about if we do not understand it or it's different to us, we fear it. We fear it and we try to oppress it. And we have at the moment in England, we have a not very liberal conservative government who are working on oppressing what is feared, or they're supporting the oppression of what is feared. Home education is different. And it is feared because it's different. Children die because they cannot cope with schools. I have people telling me on our helpline that I have saved their child's life by helping them to home educate their child. I have a grandchild who is alive today because he was home educated.
Yeah, and that's very powerful, Wendy. And it speaks to this problem that we have in this country, which is that, as I was saying earlier, for a very long time, I would say there's been an encroaching sense that the state has the right to dictate to us and to tell us how to order every single aspect of our lives. And the fact that you have parents not sending their children to school and choosing them to home educate instead, I think, well, it clearly goes against that instinct. As you say, it makes a lot of people feel instinctively uncomfortable, but it is ultimately part of what it means to be British, that we believe in a free country in which the state is not involved in every single area of our lives, and indeed in which the state does not own our children either. And so for me, one of the most concerning things about this, I mean, this is concerning for me personally, because as I say, we are home educators, but just in a more general sense, if parents want to teach their children about their Christian faith, then it is not the role of the state to be interfering in the private life of a family and potentially criminalizing those kind of actions. It is completely inappropriate. Now, we have laws already whereby if crimes are committed, then people can be prosecuted for them. But transmitting your Christian faith, or indeed I would say any other reasonable religious faith to your children, should not be viewed in anything like the same category.
Yep. We were saying this morning. I was having a little meeting. There's actually a group of home educators who pray specifically about home education, and they are praying constantly about this bill and for guidance. And we were sharing bits of the Bible that say quite clearly that, you know, home education is the way of God. And it's by no accident that many home educators are Christian, many, myself included. And it's because the state system has sought to monitor religious content in schools, and it's changed the curriculum so that it's unrecognizable from when I was a child. They have dabbled and they have tweaked and they have fiddled it until teachers are so frustrated and fed up with the government that they don't want to teach anymore. They've turned to home education instead. We are seeing them in, you know, leaps and bounds coming onto our side and saying, I see what you've seen all this time and I want to join you. I want my child to be happy. I want them to grow up being a child and then learning through God's love and through education being something that you just do. It's not forced upon you. And it's just so lovely to hear some of the wonderful stories. I mean, you've heard a lot today from Wendy and I on the negativity side of things, but I think it's really hard to sort of remember that there are real positives to home educating with the law that we currently have, and keeping that is really important. It's suited us for 40, 50, 60 years or so. You know, it doesn't need changing. It's perfectly adequate.
I think actually, if you go back historically in England, home education has only been unlawful for a period of 18 years in the history of education in England. The current Education Act provides for home education, and the wording is the same as the 1944 Act. So we're looking back. This is the 1996 Act. We're looking back a very, very long way to this Act specifically referring to education otherwise. But to come to those stories, I am not a Christian, but every Christian home educator has my support. And any Muslim home educator has my support, provided they are doing what is right for their child. And one of the aspects of this bill is it seeks to undermine and diminish home education. But the national curriculum is not a modern curriculum. It is not set for this time. And in fact, in Wales, the national curriculum is considered to be so unfit for purpose that the curriculum has changed. And we're told that we have world-class schools. We don't. We have 9 million adults in this country who are illiterate. We have about 20% of children leaving school without the minimum standards that the education department says that they should have. And when we raise the point that, look, when you serve a school attendance order on a parent, the order requires them to go into a school. They cannot go into a school that does not have a vacancy. The only schools that have vacancies in many areas are failing schools or schools in special measures. Therefore, you're putting a child who's probably receiving a perfectly adequate education at home into a failing school where they are not providing a suitable education and stating that that is suitable. And the answer that we get from the DfE is, oh, well, our schools are being improved. We're working hard to improve them. There are at least 3,000 children in schools that have been in special measures or failing for at least 13 years.
And they're given 30 months to improve.
Yes.
However, a home educator is given 15 days.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Let's have another point here about schools improving. Okay, as Amie said, they get 30 months to improve. And what's looked at it? Ofsted go in and they do a day's inspection. They do not report on an individual child's work. And yet individual children's information under this bill can be sent to the DfE, who are incontinent with their data.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to speak personally about this, I find it horrific because, quite frankly, we have no intention of educating our children in anything like the way they would be educated if they were sent to school. We have a completely different view of education, and of course, it involves things like learning to read and write. But it also involves a completely different view of culture to the kind of view that we know our children would receive if they were sent to school. And we're actually very confident that we're in a position to introduce them to various aspects of culture in a way which is far richer and more exciting for them, and more able to connect with them as children, to be something which is a kind of something which is congruent with their experience of life as children, without having to send them to school to sit behind a desk and so on and so forth. It's just we've done an episode on home education on this podcast before, but it's just a completely different way of thinking about educating your children. So the whole notion of sending your work into the Department for Education or whatever it might be, it's just a complete sort of antithesis of everything we want for our children. I'm certain that lots of home educators feel the same about this. But listen, we need to talk about just a few practical things. So one question I had is there any media exposure about this at all? Is anyone aware that it's actually happening?
We have, Education Otherwise has sent a media release. It's gone to a press agency who released it. It's also gone to 124 direct contacts, but we have had, nobody has picked it up.
Right. Okay.
Nobody has picked it up. It's not popular. But can I go back to your previous comment, Jamie? That I meant to say and got carried away. If we do not have home education, which provides different education, which provides innovation in education, how do we ever improve our school systems? Because our school systems have a set curriculum. If nobody else is working outside those school systems, how do we feed in or research to improve those systems? Because we have no other cohort to compare them to.
Yeah, quite right. And is it not the case, and you'll be much more up on this than I am, but my understanding is that outcomes in home education settings are actually higher than they are in schools?
Yes, absolutely. The international research shows that home educated children tend to be, on average, approximately a year ahead of their school peers. We know from what we're told by parents, we often get a parent will be forced to send their child to school when there is a relationship breakdown and the other parent applies to the court. In those cases, we know that schools report that the child is ahead of their class peers. We know from research that was undertaken amongst a large number, a cohort of children in England, and research from an even larger cohort in America, that home educated young adults are more likely to be involved with their community. They're more likely to understand politics. They're less likely to commit an offence leading to a disposal. They are more likely to read a book they're more likely to be in further education. If I can give a personal note here, I'm normally the data and law spokesperson, but on a personal note, if the local authority had checked the education that any of my home educated children or grandchildren received, not one of them would have been assessed as receiving a suitable education. To bring the most recent one, because I'm not currently home educated, my grandson was home educated. He did not put pen to paper and write a single word before the age of 12. From being home educated from 9, he did not write a single word because he was phobic about writing because of the way he'd been treated in school as a small boy. That boy, by the age of 12, because he could use a keyboard and he could dictate, had already attained an undergraduate diploma and 2 undergraduate certificates, but he would not handwrite a single word. He would not read a fiction book. He would not write an essay. He did not do his English GCSE, which he wanted, until a year after he achieved his first class honours degree. When he was doing his degree, he would spend a whole week doing nothing but maths. Nothing at all but maths, so he didn't have a range of learning. But that boy finished his education with 6 good grade GCSEs, 2 undergraduate certificates, a first class honours degree by the age of 15, an academic fellowship at the age of 15, and a pilot's licence by the age of 17. By the age of 16, he was also running his own business, which he had designed and set up. And he continued to be always referred to as a delightful, respectful, and socially adept young person.
That's very, very powerful. Very powerful, Wendy.
Yeah.
And it just is a great example of the way that home education really can be tailored to individual children in order to help them grow in their strengths, specifically as individuals, in ways that are just not possible in a school or in a traditional school. Let's talk about the bill itself. What stage is the bill at now, and what can folks do in order to oppose this bill and hopefully see it struck down?
At the moment, most bills start in the House of Commons and then they go to the House of Lords. This one was started in the House of Lords. First reading, which happened on the 11th of May, is a formality. Basically, the bill is presented to the House, it's read to the House, but there's no debate. On Monday, the 23rd of May, the bill has its second reading in the House of Lords. There is some debate at that point. That's the point at which peers can go into the House and they can raise their concerns about the bill and probably suggest that further investigation is required and this needs to have a committee or a group to discuss what the issues are with it. Once that's done, it would come back to a third reading. We get first reading, second reading, third reading, that amendments can happen at any point. Once it's finalised from the House of Lords, it goes to the House of Commons, and essentially in the House of Commons can either just get passed through on a vote or get debated again. So you've got 2 opportunities here as an individual. You can approach, if you know any peers who might be sympathetic or might have some understanding, or you feel might listen to you, you can approach them. You can approach your MP. Approach your MP and tell your MP what your personal experience is and what you feel is wrong about this bill. If you go to the Education Otherwise website, there is a briefing paper on the news section which gives some outlines of what we have told MPs is wrong with the bill. But you will have your own ideas as well. You can also join in if you keep an eye on Facebook groups. we are organising other moves. So go to your MP, explain to your MP. Jamie raised the point about the press are not picking up on this. It's just not sexy for them to pick up with it because we are not a majority group who can influence their sales or influence how the public view them. And unless you are that sort of group, the press doesn't tend to pick up on what you are saying. However, if you go to your local press, your local newspaper, or your local media, and you explain to your local media, this bill is coming out, I'm a local person, and this is how it will affect me, the local media is much more likely to pick up on that. And once the local media pick up on it, so the national media begin to. And the more the media picks up on it, the more investigative journalism takes place, and the more likely it is that the flaws that we have identified will be made much more public.
Thank you, Wendy. And Amie, I believe you're involved in some activism around this bill as well. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was saying to a friend the other day, I've never ever done anything wrong or what could be seen as being unruly. However, this bill has made me feel so passionately opposed to it that I felt that I needed to take the responsibility of organising things and assisting people who are doing things. So one action that we've decided to take is on the day that the second reading is to take place on Monday at 12:30 to 2:30, just before they sit in the House of Lords, we will be outside with some placards explaining exactly why this bill is not a good idea, in a very peaceful way with children, so that they can see these children are not in school. They are able to articulate very, very well why they don't agree to this bill, and that their parents are supporting them in every way to help them see that this is how law gets changed. This is how law gets debated. This is how we put forward our voice as a community. And we're hoping that at some point our MPs might come out and speak to us. We're hoping that the MPs that are present will aid people to have a little tour of the Houses of Parliament, because it is a lovely thing to see. I mean, it's a beautiful building.
Yep.
And the political process and the history and everything else can all be found at the Houses of Parliament. So it's a very good educational opportunity, as well as an opportunity for us to stand together and say, you know, this isn't going to go by like, you know, a breeze for you. We are going to stand up. We are going to say, this isn't right. You need to go home and do your homework, because we've done our homework, and we have already come up with thousands of cases where if this bill is put in place will cause death. And it is that horrifyingly morbid. And I don't like being morbid at all. I like being all upbeat and kittens and flowers, but this bill really is the devil's work, and we can't sit by idle. We have to answer the call. And you know, we might find that it's easier to retweet posts, or we might find that speaking to our MP is more comfortable for us than going to the House of Parliament and standing with a placard. But everybody needs to do their bit, because you know, there are actions coming. This is just the beginning, and we're hoping that this will be enough to say that isn't a good enough reason to register us, go away and think about it a bit harder and come up with some real evidence.
I think there is a maxim that people need to be aware of, and that don't think that what you can do is too little, because for every beach there are thousands of grains of sand that made up that beach. You cannot make a loaf of bread without lots of grains. So every grain counts, because without that grain you would not have your loaf of bread, or you would not have your beach. So do what you can. The more you can do, obviously, the more the contribution will spiral. But if you can do a little, do a little.
And Wendy, you mentioned some Facebook groups. Are you able to give us the names of some of those, so if folks want to find them, they can go on there?
Yeah, if you could. The main one that I deal with is home education and your local authority. There's the Education Otherwise group. Amie will know others that are included with this as well.
Yeah, the Home Education Action Group is the main hub of information. You can also visit some websites as well. hebite.uk is a really good one for just having little bites of information that are easy to digest and understand. There's also Home Education, and I believe it's the media monitoring group, where people are looking at news articles pro and against home education, so that they're sort of looking at how the media are monitoring home education. And of course, you can always ask in your local education groups as well for advice and support, and see if anybody else feels the same way as you, because we're hoping that there will be a mass protest organised. So we will be doing little picnics across the country where people can all sign petitions and then send that off to their MPs. And then that will be all processed through one MP, who will file that into the back of the Speaker's chair. And that's where we get our phrase "in the bag" from. So just to give you a little bit of humour there, we've got it in the bag is definitely where it comes from, and hopefully we will all have it in the bag.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to say to anyone who's watching or listening to this, if you've got this far, please do share this episode as widely as you possibly can, because it really helps us to improve our reach. So just go ahead and share this on Twitter or Facebook just right now, and that will definitely increase the reach of this podcast. I'm going to share it as widely as possible so that as many people can see it as possible. But Wendy and Amie, I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast to talk about this, and thank you for everything that you've been doing behind the scenes. I've been involved in not all that much political activism in my life, but certainly some over the past couple of years, and I understand how absolutely draining it can be, apart from anything else, because of the amount of administration that you have to do and organization. So you're doing a great job. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you too. I booked a good night's sleep for some time in 2024.
Fantastic. Okay, all right. Well, let's keep an eye on this, and I might have to invite you back on to talk about it. Hopefully it will just die a death and go away. Is there any scope for that at all?
Yes.
You think so?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. Strength in numbers, strength in force. Yeah. The more we get across how bad this is, the more chance we have of defeating it. If MPs know that there is a lot of feeling about this, that's a lot of votes, and votes mean changes. So if an MP thinks that this is going to change how many people vote for him, which a show of force would put forward, then yes.
Especially as this isn't just about home educators. This is called the Schools Bill. So it is going to affect parents throughout the UK, irrespective of their educational choices. So as I said earlier, EHCP, EOTAS, those educating by other means, those educating with tutors, those educating in school, special schools, provisions. There's a plethora of different options. It's going to affect all of us. It's just that we're more reactive to our bit of it, because we've been fighting since 2009, and some of us, like bless her Wendy and a few of my colleagues, have been fighting since then and before that even. But it's just one of those things that we all as a human race need to need to defend our right to be parents.
Yeah.
You know, we had children, not the state.
Yes.
And we should be able to raise them the way that we feel is suitable.
Yes.
I can throw in a couple of extra points here, Jamie. One is, you may not know about the scheme called Contact Point in England, which aimed to create a register for children receiving services from Children's Social Services. That register was set up at huge cost and abandoned within a very short time because of concerns about privacy rights. That says it all. This is reinventing the wheel of creating a monster, and we do not want a monster.
Yeah.
There's no, the government have identified there's no national data protection policy for local authorities. So each local authority can make up their own data protection.
Yeah, well, that is not very reassuring, is it? And as we were saying, let's just hope that we can create as much noise as possible, and other people can as well, and just put to death this bill as quickly as it seems to have arisen. It certainly appeared on my radar out of nowhere, and I was horrified to hear about it. And I do hope this podcast, and indeed everything that you're doing in your efforts, will make all the difference. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks to everyone for listening. And as I say, do please share this podcast. Write to your MP, write to a peer if you know a peer. Go and find out about what's going on in your local media and get involved in this conversation. And I look forward to being with you again next time.